Hey guys, Jade Johnson here, Transgender Support. Today I would like to talk about 3 things that all trans people need to consider when they're looking into the future and planning for associated healthcare needs. So of course there's going to be more than just these 3 things, but these are 3 things that come up a lot in my conversations. So I want to make sure that you keep them at the front of your mind as you're doing your planning, especially because I'm hearing a lot from people that they're thinking about moving coming up, different states, even different countries. So I want to make sure you keep these 3 things in mind, okay? So the first thing is going to be, what sort of insurance options or some sort of support are you going to have either where you live or where you're planning to relocate to? Okay, now this is very important, all right? Because when you're thinking about assistance with hormones, having regular appointments with endocrinologists about your hormones, having consults for surgery, checking on your general health when you're taking the hormones, how's it affecting your body? There's a lot of things that are going to happen that are going to probably increase the amount of time you spend talking with different types of doctors, okay? And as much as possible, if you can get some support for that, it's really, really helpful, okay? No matter what your situation is. Now, depending on your location, depending on the healthcare network, you're going to find that some hospitals and insurance agencies, they work together sometimes better than other times to provide what we like to talk about as trans-friendly insurances, right? They might talk about it a different way, but the gist is the same. You want to be in a place where if you bring up, oh yes, I need to talk to someone about maybe getting on hormones, it shouldn't be met with some sort of opposition or surprise, right? You want to make sure that the people with whom you're working and the insurance that you have that's going to be providing coverage is sort of used to these sorts of conversations, used to this sort of coverage, right? Otherwise, you're just going to be adding another uphill battle. So it's not an uncommon question these days. When you're looking at it, when you're changing jobs, when you're changing locations, always make sure that you're going to be in a situation where, as much as possible, you have some sort of trans-friendly insurance, because then you'll have an easier time getting hopefully some coverage or some assisted coverage with the many, many appointments that are going to be coming up, okay? So that's number 1. The second item is going to be, consider the location of your physicians and your providers, all right? Now, this is something really interesting for me and somewhat anecdotal, because I've considered, based on jobs and stuff like that, a few relocations myself. And when I've done that, give you a real example. I've been looking quite a bit at, for example, Austin, which, not to get into the whole thing, but a lot of people know that Austin, Texas is sort of like this blue, they call it the blueberry, in the middle of like a big red state. And there's, of course, other blue parts of Texas. That's not the point of this video. But the point is, as far as the interaction I had with people, having chats when I was there, that was all really great. That was all very positive. As far as the demeanor or people's reception of trans topics, that was all very positive. But when I was doing my research, I started to see that the first physicians that came up, as far as anything related to surgery or hormones, there was a lot in Houston, there was a lot in Dallas. And that was very interesting to me, because Austin is popularly known to be probably the most liberal part of the state. So I thought, well, that should have the most resources. And don't attack me in the comments. I only did a few searches. I'm sure there's plenty of coverage there. Maybe, maybe not. But the point is, what came up in my first searches were Dallas and Houston. That's not surprising, one, because they do also have a large progressive population as well, at least parts of the population, but also they're just much bigger cities still. Austin is growing rapidly, but Houston and Dallas are much bigger. And Houston specifically, is, from my research, is really a healthcare hub. So of course they're going to have a lot more physicians who specialize in all sorts of topics. So my consideration was, well, maybe where I'm living, I'm not going to have trouble with my insurance, maybe. Or maybe I can have those chats in my community around me. But do I have to drive 3.5 hours to get to an appointment? 3 hours, 3.5 hours? That could be more challenging, not impossible. And we make work what we need to make work. But, you look at those situations, and I just use that, again, anecdotally, because that's what I've done. Wherever you are in the country, or if you're in a different country, always look at what is a situation for the location of your physicians, your providers. Because, again, it's not going to be once every few months only. Especially when you're starting your transition, most likely you're going to have more doctor's appointments. You're going to have to see people more regularly. And that's also true for if you decide to have surgery, either top or bottom surgery as a trans woman, there's going to be follow-up. You're going to have to be checking in afterwards. So every time you do that, if you have to drive a few hours or more, is that going to be a problem for you? Maybe it's not, maybe it is, but do consider that. The third and final thing is try to see if you can find somewhat of a centralization of your medical community and resources. What do I mean by that? Again, this is not something that's imperative. You don't have to do it, but it can make it easier. A lot of people have told me it makes it easier if you have your primary physician at hospital A and you get a new endocrinologist to help you with hormones, they're at the same hospital. Maybe your surgeon that you find is at the same hospital. I've seen many different ways. It doesn't have to be this way. For my own journey, I'm actually between two networks, both great networks, both very supportive, and I've made it work. But I can tell you that the more you have information sharing within the hospital network, it just makes things so much easier. The doctors can speak to each other more freely. You have less legal as well as operational potential setback. So not a must, but again, just something to think about. If you can find those resources within the same network, then go for it. Which is why in my last video and other videos I talk about, ask your physician those questions. If it's your primary and you say, I'm thinking about starting hormones, maybe you can ask them, well, do you have any endocrinologists that you recommend here at this hospital? Surgeons the same way. And, make sure that when you're asking that, if you're in a bigger city where maybe the hospital network has many locations, figure out where their offices are for your commute, for your accessibility, okay? So those are just 3 things I wanted to mention when considering your upcoming healthcare needs. Again, trans-friendly insurance, okay? The location of the actual providers, where your doctor's going to be, how do you get to those appointments, right? And then as much as possible, how you can centralize your group of physicians and medical professionals so that information can be shared, if not in one medical network, maybe just max a couple. You don't want to have 3 or 4. It can get complicated and certainly much more legwork. So let me know any further questions you have. Those are 3 things, though, that I think will help you to start your planning today. Have a good one.